Serena, you really should consider finding a new job. Alexandra elegantly sliced the honey-glazed ham on her plate. Her Van Cleef & Arpels four-leaf clover diamond bracelet catching the light from the Christmas tree, casting fragments of expensive brilliance across the dining room. She wore a Chanel seasonal red Christmas dress, having just concluded an elaborate monologue about her newly purchased apartment on Park Avenue in Manhattan, casually mentioning her current salary as an investment advisor at Goldman Sachs, $250,000 annually. I mean, the night shift at Target is certainly stable, but you're 27 years old now. You can't spend your entire life working as a cashier, can you? Her tone carried what seemed like genuine concern for her cousin, but the bone-deep superiority that permeated her words felt like the overzealous flames from the fireplace, scorching the warm atmosphere of the room. I sat wearing a green sweater I had found at Old Navy, paired with the most ordinary jeans imaginable, without a single item on my person that could be called a brand name. My second-hand Honda Civic waited quietly in the driveway outside, forming a stark and cruel contrast to Alexandra's gleaming pearl-white Tesla Model S that still managed to shine despite the snowy night. Alexandra is absolutely right. My father David set down his wineglass, his expression serious and worried. Just look at your cousin, working on Wall Street, now that's what I call a future. We're only concerned about your future, my mother Catherine quickly chimed in, always playing the role of gentle mediator, though the disappointment in her eyes was impossible to hide. Sweetheart, the work at Target is just too ordinary. You're so intelligent, you could certainly have better opportunities. Around the dinner table, Uncle Jonathan and Aunt Miranda nodded in agreement. Even Grandmother Vivian, who had always cherished me most, simply sighed and looked at me with eyes that mixed sympathy and helplessness, as if I were the disappointing problem child who brought shame upon the entire Sterling family, and I simply sat there, quietly cutting the overly sweet Christmas pudding on my plate, mixing it with the vanilla ice cream beside it with my spoon. Faced with a table full of well-meaning advice and disappointed glances, I occasionally lifted my head and nodded, maintaining what appeared to be an almost numb, gentle smile. They assumed I was wallowing in despair, or perhaps feeling ashamed of my pitiful circumstances. But in reality, my mind was operating at lightning speed. Could this happen where you live? Drop your location in the comments. And subscribe if you want more stories. Now, let me tell you what came next. Just 30 minutes earlier, I had remotely vetoed a $12 billion acquisition targeting Japan's semiconductor industry through encrypted channels. My reasoning was simple. While the target company possessed leading technology, its internal management was chaotic and its core patents carried future litigation risks. My Asian team was still debating the decision, but I had already foreseen the financial scandal that would engulf this company in 3 months. Abandoning these $12 billion was to preserve my fund's ability to earn $120 billion in the future. My mind was still reviewing last Friday's European market closing data, along with the Federal Reserve's latest beige book and the subtle hints hidden between the lines regarding next year's interest rate trajectory. Alexandra's proudly mentioned $250,000 salary, frankly speaking, wouldn't even cover the annual parking and maintenance fees for my Gulfstream G650. The Park Avenue apartment she had mentioned, I knew that building project well. Sterling Capital's real estate fund was one of the largest investors in that development. Ironically, every property fee she paid would eventually flow back into my pocket as profit. But I couldn't say anything. I was simply Serena Sterling, an ordinary girl who had grown up in suburban Connecticut, a Yale University history graduate who couldn't find a respectable job and had to work as a cashier at Target. The family failure. Serena, listen to me, Alexandra was clearly dissatisfied with my seemingly stubborn attitude. She set down her knife and fork, leaned forward, and adopted a patronizing posture. This isn't just about money, it's about the circles you move in. What kind of people can you possibly meet at Target? And me. Just last week, I had dinner with a legendary figure in hedge funds. We discussed global macroeconomic trends. Your perspective determines your future, do you understand? My heart remained completely unmoved. I almost wanted to laugh. The legendary figure she mentioned had sent me an email 3 days ago, hoping to secure a face-to-face meeting to present his new fund concept. My assistant had politely declined because his investment model seemed outdated and full of flaws to me. Here's what we'll do. Alexandra seemed to have made up her mind, speaking with magnanimous generosity. Goldman Sachs happens to have a receptionist position available at our front desk. It's just reception work, but at least it would expose you to the financial industry. I could put in a good word with HR. With your appearance, you should have no problem getting the position. It's certainly better than scanning barcodes at a supermarket, right? Consider it my Christmas gift to you. Wow, Alexandra, you're so wonderful to Serena. Aunt Miranda immediately gushed with exaggerated praise. Yes, Serena, this is Goldman Sachs. So many people would kill for a chance to get in. Father's eyes lit up as if he could already see hope for my escape from suffering. The entire table's atmosphere instantly became enthusiastic, with everyone celebrating Alexandra's generosity and my good fortune, as if I had already been accepted for this receptionist position. The fireplace burned brightly, reflecting their expectant faces. The Christmas tree lights twinnled tirelessly, and the air was filled with the mixed aromas of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and pine needles. This was a typical, warm, and perfect Christmas evening family scene, yet it made me feel an unprecedented sense of suffocation. I lifted my head, looked at Alexandra's face, radiant with self-satisfaction, and slowly, clearly said, "Thank you, Alex. But I think I quite enjoy working at Target for now." Instantly, the air froze. Everyone's smiles became rigid on their faces. "Serena!" Mother's voice carried a sharp note of disbelief. "Do you know what you're saying?" "Child, don't be so stubborn." Father's brow furrowed into a knot. Alexandra's expression transformed from generosity to bewilderment, then from bewilderment to anger. She probably felt her kindness had been treated as worthless, her elevated dignity insulted. "Serena Sterling, I truly don't understand you." She laughed coldly, leaned back in her chair, and picked up her knife and fork again. "Some people are just content with mediocrity. You can't help those who won't help themselves. I've said all I can say, do as you please." Oppressive silence once again enveloped the dinner table. The Santa-shaped candle burned quietly, wax tears dripping one by one like silent weeping. Outside the window, snowflakes began to fall, sticking to the glass one by one before melting. I watched the blurred world outside, feeling like one of those snowflakes, briefly touching warmth, only to melt away, misunderstood. I simply ate the last spoonful of pudding from my plate in silence, occasionally nodding in response to my family's scattered, disappointed sighs, maintaining that impeccable gentle smile on my face. No one knew that in less than 2 hours, this problem girl, they considered worthless, would make them all reconsider what true shock meant. And this carefully orchestrated performance I had directed for 3 years was about to reach its most magnificent conclusion tonight. The post-dinner period should have been devoted to the warm ritual of opening gifts and casual conversation. We gathered around the fireplace in the living room, our feet resting on the soft Persian carpet. Grandmother Vivian was distributing hand-knitted wool socks filled with candy and small trinkets to everyone. The television played the classic Christmas movie, Love Actually, its cheerful soundtrack trying desperately to dispel the earlier dinner table awkwardness, but with little success. The family's conversation deliberately avoided my work and future, turning instead to discussions of weather, community news, and harmless gossip. Alexandra was completely absorbed in her phone world, her fingers flying across the screen, probably responding to Christmas greetings from her elite circle. I held a cushion embroidered with reindeer patterns, quietly watching the dancing flames in the fireplace. The firelight illuminated my face in flickering patterns. I mentally calculated the time. According to the schedule, Theodore Whitfield should finish his family gathering around 9:30. He was a workaholic who, even on Christmas Eve, wouldn't be able to resist one final check on that major resolution affecting Goldman Sachs's next year's performance. Everything was proceeding according to my calculations. My calmness appeared to them as the numbness of self-abandonment. Father glanced at me from time to time, then shook his head helplessly. Mother handed me a cup of hot cocoa, saying softly, "Drink something warm, Serena." Her tone was like comforting a child who had failed an exam. I smiled and accepted it, saying, "Thank you." The sweetness of the hot cocoa spread across my tongue, but what I tasted was a hint of bitterness. For 3 years, in order to live this ordinary life, to avoid being burdened by the Sterling surname, I had paid too high a price. I had hidden my identity, cut all ties with my past circles, and lived like a truly ordinary person. I thought this would earn me pure family love, an affection untainted by money and status. Facts proved I might have been too naive. They loved me, but they loved a successful version of me even more. Just then, a sharp, urgent phone ring cut through the living room's tranquility. It was that typical business ringtone, impersonal, cold, and efficient. It was Alexandra's phone. She glanced at the caller ID and immediately straightened up, the lazy superiority on her face instantly vanishing, replaced by almost obsequious deference. She gestured for us to be quiet, then walked to the relatively quiet foyer to answer, but her voice still carried over. "Theodore, good evening. Merry Christmas." Her voice was sweet and humble, completely different from when she had lectured me earlier. Yes, I'm with family. Oh, of course, you're absolutely right. Work comes first. Theodore Whitfield. I paused slightly while holding my hot cocoa. Here it comes. He was Goldman Sachs's managing director, also Alexandra's direct supervisor, a man known on Wall Street for his shrewdness and ruthlessness. His calling Alexandra now could only be for one thing. What? Sterling Capital? Alexandra's voice suddenly rose, then immediately lowered to nervous whispers. Yes, I know, the mysterious fund managing $280 billion. All of Wall Street is speculating about who their CEO is. Everyone in the living room instinctively fell silent. Even mother and grandmother, who knew nothing about finance, were stunned by the astronomical figure of $280 billion. Father and uncle exchanged shocked glances. A barely perceptible smile tugged at the corner of my mouth in an unnoticed corner. Yes, Theodore, I understand how important this collaboration is for us. If we could secure even a small portion of their asset management rights, our department's bonus pool could double this year. Alexandra's voice was filled with desire and excitement. She paused, apparently listening carefully to instructions from the other end. Her expression grew increasingly confused and serious. You're saying, the CEO is a very young woman? Her voice carried disbelief. How is this possible? Managing nearly $300 billion in funds, how old is she? My gaze passed over the dancing flames to rest on a decorative mirror hanging on the opposite wall. The reflection showed me in my plain green sweater, bare-faced, looking like a girl fresh out of college. Who could possibly connect me with that mysterious young wealthy female CEO mentioned on the phone? What? You've looked into her background, Yale graduate, history major. Alexandra's voice began to tremble with absurd confusion. Father and mother exchanged glances, their expressions becoming strange. Yale, history major, these keywords hit them precisely. Surname, you're saying her surname is Sterling. When that word escaped Alexandra's lips, I clearly felt the air in the entire living room being sucked away. Father, mother, uncle, aunt, everyone's gaze swept toward me like searchlights. Their eyes were filled with suspicion, confusion, absurdity, and a faint hope they didn't dare believe. Alexandra also realized this coincidence. I could see her rigid silhouette from the shadows of the foyer. She instinctively looked back at me, her eyes expressing ultimate complexity. But she quickly turned back, letting out a nervous laugh into the phone. Ha ha. Theodore, you must be joking. Sterling is a very common surname. Yes, my cousin is also named Sterling. She's also called Serena. No, absolutely impossible. Her voice was filled with panicked denial. She's just an ordinary person who works at Target. How could she possibly be? Ha ha. She hung up the phone, took a deep breath as if trying to shake off that ridiculous thought, then returned to the living room with a forced smile, attempting to restore normalcy to the atmosphere. Sorry about that, it was my boss, she explained with feigned casualness. Just some work matters. Wall Street never rests, not even on Christmas Eve. But no one responded. Everyone's gaze continued moving between me and her. What's wrong? Alexandra became uncomfortable under their stares. Why are you looking at me like that? Alex, Mother's voice was somewhat hoarse. The person mentioned on the phone, Sterling Capital's CEO. Oh, Mum, that's just a coincidence. Alexandra impatiently interrupted her. Same name, even the same surname. You don't seriously think it's Serena, do you? She can't even read basic candlestick charts. Managing 280 billion. Don't be ridiculous. That's more than the assets under management of an entire major division at Goldman Sachs. Her words were like cold water, extinguishing the absurd spark that had just ignited in her family's eyes. Yes, it was too unrealistic. One was a supermarket cashier who wouldn't even change jobs. The other was a mysterious financial queen commanding Wall Street. The gap between them was more distant than from Earth to the moon. Their expressions returned to that familiar disappointment and sympathy. My heart remained unmoved. I even appreciated Theodore's efficiency. He could always pinpoint the most crucial information precisely. The Christmas Eve tranquility had been thoroughly shattered by that phone call. Like a stone thrown into a lake, though the ripples had temporarily calmed, undercurrents beneath the surface had begun to surge. I knew the climax was about to arrive. I lowered my head and took another sip of the now somewhat cooled hot cocoa. The real show was about to begin. Alexandra's denial temporarily stabilized the situation, but the atmosphere could never truly return to normal. The ending credits of Love Actually were already playing, Hugh Grant's classic monologue echoing through the living room, though no one was really listening. Everyone was preoccupied, the impact of that phone call far greater than Alexandra had imagined. We began opening gifts. Alexandra received the latest Hermès scarf from her parents and an expensive bottle of Romane Conti wine from uncle and aunt. She displayed her presents, trying to steer the conversation back to familiar, controlled territory, but everyone's responses seemed distracted. When my turn came, Father and mother gave me a beautiful set of literary classics, hoping I would read more and improve myself. Grandmother gave me a scarf she had knitted herself, soft and warm. Alexandra handed me a beautifully wrapped box containing a set of expensive professional attire. I thought, if you decide to interview at Goldman Sachs, you'll need a proper outfit. Her words carried that charitable superiority again. I smiled and thanked her, accepting the clothes. Inwardly, I thought the fabric and tailoring of this outfit couldn't compare to any casual wear I typically wore to my office. Just then, the doorbell rang. Ding dong! The crisp chime seemed particularly jarring in the quiet living room. Who could that be at this hour? Mother stood up in confusion. Outside, heavy snow was falling, and the community roads should have been difficult to navigate. Maybe it's Carola's, Grandmother guessed. Father rose to answer the door. I could feel Alexandra's body instantly tense. She seemed to sense something ominous approaching. The door opened and a gust of wind mixed with snowflakes rushed in, causing the fireplace flames to flicker. A man stood at the doorway wearing a dark grey Burberry cashmere coat, his shoulders dusted with a thin layer of snow. He was tall with a sharp demeanor. Even slightly disheveled from the snowy night, he couldn't conceal the keen aura belonging to Wall Street's top elite. It was Theodore Whitfield. "Theodore!" Alexandra cried out, springing from the sofa, her face drained of all color. How did you get here?" Theodore's gaze swept across the living room, first nodding politely to the astonished family members, then noticing the pale-faced Alexandra. He merely frowned slightly, looking somewhat puzzled, but his target was clearly not her. His eyes searched the living room and finally settled precisely on me, the person in a green sweater, holding a reindeer cushion, sitting quietly in the corner of the sofa. In that instant, Theodore's face showed an expression mixing surprise, respect, and the relief of finally finding his target. He completely ignored everyone else, walking straight across the living room toward me. Time seemed to slow down in that moment. I saw Father's mouth hanging open, his hand still on the doorknob, forgetting to close the door. I saw Mother's hot cocoa cup trembling, brown liquid spilling onto the carpet. I saw Uncle and Aunt frozen like statues, completely motionless. I saw Grandmother adjusting her reading glasses, as if not believing her eyes. And Alexandra, her expression was unlike anything I had ever seen. It was one of ultimate shock, followed by complete panic, as if she were witnessing the most impossible thing that would overturn her entire worldview. Theodore stopped before me, bowing slightly with respectful propriety, nothing like a managing director who would boss around subordinates. His voice was clear and steady, cutting through the deathly silence. "Miss Sterling, good evening. I sincerely apologize for disturbing you and your family on Christmas Eve." He used the formal address, Miss Sterling, not Serena. This was a respectful, formal title used in business settings for extremely important individuals. In the living room, everyone's breathing stopped. Theodore seemed completely oblivious to this eerie atmosphere. He took out a tablet from his briefcase and continued in his businesslike tone. "Miss Sterling, regarding the $280 billion global investment portfolio plan that requires your final decision tomorrow, our Goldman Sachs strategy team worked through the night to make some adjustments. I personally believe the emerging markets section still has room for optimization, so I've taken the liberty of coming here, hoping to occupy 10 minutes of your time for an urgent briefing. $280 billion. This figure exploded like a bombshell in the small living room. The number heard on the phone was now being personally confirmed by a living, breathing Wall Street heavyweight, speaking directly to me, Serena Sterling, in front of everyone. "Theodore, you," Are you mistaken? Alexandra's voice trembled like sleep-talking. She's Serena, my cousin. She works at Target. Only then did Theodore truly look at her, his frown deepening, his eyes filled with questioning of his subordinate's professionalism and displeasure. Mistaken? Alexandra, what are you talking about? His tone became stern. This is the founder and chief executive officer of Sterling Capital, Miss Serena Sterling, the S that all of Wall Street has been searching for. You've worked at Goldman Sachs for so many years. Can't you recognize our most important potential client? He turned back to me, immediately resuming his respectful attitude. Miss Sterling, your low profile is truly beyond everyone's expectations. I never imagined you would choose to experience life at Target. Perhaps this is the secret behind your precise grasp of consumer market trends. Your investment vision, like your lifestyle, is filled with unfathomable wisdom. In this moment, the world became completely silent. Father leaned against the doorframe as if all his strength had been drained. Mother covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes, whether from excitement or guilt, I couldn't tell. Uncle and aunt looked at each other, their expressions as colorful as a painter's palette. And Alexandra, she collapsed back onto the sofa with a thud. The Hermès scarf slipped from her hands to the floor, its bright orange color now seeming blindingly garish. She looked at me with eyes no longer filled with panic but with complete collapse. Everything she took pride in, her job, her salary, her circle, her sense of superiority, crumbled to dust before the figure, 280 billion, and my calm face. The cousin she had pitied, sympathized with, and tried to elevate, the supermarket cashier she considered worthless, was actually the one standing at the pyramid's peak, overlooking all beings, someone even her boss's boss had to look up to. Christmas Eve had become a truly shocking night. I slowly stood up, placed the cushion aside, and walked to Theodore. I didn't look at my family's faces filled with shock, nor did I acknowledge the now soulless Alexandra. I simply looked at Theodore, my face still wearing that gentle smile, but my eyes had changed. They now held the sharp, unquestionable gaze of a decision-maker. Mr. Whitfield, I spoke, my voice not loud but clear and powerful. First, today is Christmas Eve. Second, my investment decisions are never changed. Finally, regarding the emerging markets section you just mentioned, if I remember correctly, that strategy's core model is based on a geopolitical assumption that's been outdated for 3 years. I suggest you go back and have that young man named Peter on your team rerun the data. I paused and continued. Send the updated report to my secure email by 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Now, you may leave. Merry Christmas to you and your family. Theodore was stunned. He hadn't expected such directness, much less that I would know the name of an analyst on his team and the flaws in their model so clearly. The respect on his face quickly transformed into genuine awe mixed with apprehension. Yes, Miss Sterling, I understand. My sincere apologies for the disturbance. He immediately put away his tablet, bowed deeply to me, then almost fled from this small house that filled him with overwhelming pressure. As the door was instinctively closed by Father, shutting out the wind and snow, the living room was left with only deathly silence and the heavy, chaotic breathing of my family. All eyes once again focused on me. Only this time, there was no sympathy or disappointment in their gazes. Only endless shock, searching, and bewilderment. The grand performance I had orchestrated had finally reached its conclusion. After Theodore left, the silence in the living room lasted a full minute. The crackling of burning wood in the fireplace became the only sound. Finally, Father was the first to break the silence. He walked up to me, This usually stern and serious man now with reddened eyes, his voice filled with complex emotions. "Serena, my daughter, is this really true?" I looked at him and nodded gently, saying softly, "Yes, father." Mother was already crying uncontrollably. She came over and hugged me tightly. "Oh my God, Serena. Why did you keep this from us? How much have you suffered?" I gently patted Mother's back, feeling her body trembling. I could understand her feelings, a mixture of heartache, pride, and deep self-reproach. I looked around at my family members, each face written with bewilderment. Uncle awkwardly rubbed his hands while Aunt nervously straightened her skirt. Grandmother simply watched me quietly, her eyes showing not just shock but a knowing wisdom, as if she had long sensed I was no ordinary person. Finally, my gaze fell on Alexandra. She still sat on the sofa, pale as paper, staring vacantly at the forgotten Hermes scarf on the floor. She seemed drained of her soul, the proud, confident Wall Street elite, now as fragile as a lost child. I walked over to her, bent down, picked up the scarf, and gently placed it on the coffee table beside her. Then I took the interview professional outfit she had given me and held it out to her. "Alex," I began, my voice gentle and calm, "thank you for the gift. However, I don't think I'll need it." Alexandra's body trembled violently. She slowly lifted her head to look at me, her lips quivering but unable to speak. I looked directly into her eyes and continued. "Your earlier advice was actually quite reasonable. You said perspective determines future, and circles are important. These points are all correct, but you might have misunderstood something." I paused, letting my words settle. A person's value isn't determined by which circle they enter, but by what kind of circle they themselves can create. You suggested I work as a receptionist, saying it would allow me to meet successful people and build networks. You were absolutely right. That's an effective path for climbing upward. But for me, I prefer to become the person others want to meet and network with. My words carried no mockery, merely stating a fact. But this fact was more powerful than any sharp sarcasm. As for the target job, I smiled. I wasn't experiencing life. That store's sales data, customer traffic changes, inventory turnover rates. All this most real, cutting-edge consumer behavior data is personally organized by me every evening after work and transmitted to our fund's consumer industry analysis team. It's more timely and accurate than any consulting company reports. Last quarter, based solely on this first-hand data, we successfully shorted a retail giant that the market widely favored, earning over $3 billion. I watched Alexandra's eyes widen again with shock, my tone becoming even gentler. "Alex, your professional abilities are strong. Reaching your current position at Goldman Sachs is truly remarkable. But remember, never use your social stratum to define others' worth. Because you never know how vast a world someone you consider ordinary actually inhabits." After speaking, I gently placed the professional outfit on the empty seat beside her. This wasn't humiliation, but a return of property to its rightful owner. Our worlds had never existed in the same dimension from the beginning. Then I turned to face my family. Father, mother, uncle, aunt. I took a deep breath. "I know you have many questions. I hid my identity not to deceive you. Quite the opposite, I was seeking something pure. After graduating from Yale, I inherited the initial fund left by grandfather. Sterling Capital was founded by me. In Wall Street circles, the Sterling surname represents capital and power. If I had appeared before you with this identity from the beginning, would what I received have been family love or awe toward wealth and status? I didn't want to live under that halo, at least not at home. I wanted to be nagged by you, cared for by you, like an ordinary daughter. I wanted to know whether, when I had nothing but, was just a supermarket cashier, you would still sit here with me sharing Christmas Eve as you do now. My voice became somewhat choked. These 3 years, I've heard many disappointed sighs and felt many sympathetic gazes. I admit, sometimes it hurt. But what I feared more was that if I revealed my cards, would this most precious family bond between us change its flavor? Mother couldn't hold back any longer. She stepped forward and hugged me again, crying, "I'm sorry, Serena. Mother was wrong. We were too shallow. We only saw your job, but not your person. I'm sorry." Father also approached, placing his rough palm on my head and ruffling it like when I was small, his voice hoarse. "Good child. Father was wrong. Father is proud of you, not because of those 280 billion, but because you possess such wisdom and grace. You are the true pride of the Sterling family." Uncle and aunt also apologized repeatedly, their faces filled with guilt. A heart-stopping identity revelation ultimately returned to the essence of family and kinship. What I wanted was never their worship and awe, but the simplest, purest understanding and acceptance. The snow outside had stopped at some point. Moonlight pierced through the clouds, spilling onto the white snow-covered ground, reflecting soft and bright light. The Christmas tree lights continued to twinkle, but now they seemed warmer than ever before. I walked over to Alexandra, who still sat in a daze, and extended my hand to her. "Alex, the movie's over, and we've finished opening gifts. Grandmother's apple pie should be ready by now. Shall we go have some together?" Alexandra looked up, tears finally breaking free from her hollow eyes. She stared at my outstretched hand, hesitating for a long time before tremblingly placing her own hand in mine. I gripped her cold hand firmly and pulled her up from the sofa's depths. In that moment, I felt the invisible wall built from money, status, and prejudice between us finally beginning to crumble. True strength is never displayed through showing off, but stems from inner fortitude and tolerance toward others. And family acceptance should never be built upon worldly success. It is more precious than any wealth in the world. This Christmas Eve began with suppressed warmth, experienced dramatic shock, and ultimately ended with profound reflection and tender reconciliation. I looked at the fireplace flames that had grown strong again, at my family's relieved smiles, at the new and pristine world illuminated by moonlight outside the window. I knew that starting tomorrow, everything would be different, and I, Serena Sterling, could finally shed my disguise and embrace my family and everything I had created with my most authentic self. The warmth that had returned to our living room felt different now. Not the artificial cheer of earlier in the evening, but something deeper and more genuine. As we moved toward the kitchen where grandmother's apple pie waited, I noticed how naturally the conversation began to flow. No longer were there forced topics or careful avoidances. Father asked thoughtful questions about my work, genuinely curious rather than judgmental. Mother wondered aloud about the loneliness I must have felt, keeping such a monumental secret. "The isolation must have been tremendous," she said, as we gathered around the kitchen island, the warm scent of cinnamon and baked apples enveloping us. "All those times we worried about your future. And you were carrying such enormous responsibility." I cut into the golden pie, steam rising from the flaky crust. "The hardest part wasn't the responsibility," I admitted. "It was sitting at this very table, hearing the disappointment in your voices, and not being able to explain that I was exactly where I needed to be." Alexandra sat quietly, still processing everything. When I handed her a slice of pie, She looked up with eyes that held a new kind of vulnerability I had never seen before. "Serena," she said quietly, "I owe you more than an apology. I owe you an acknowledgement that I let my own insecurities turn me into someone I don't recognize. These past few years, I thought success meant being better than others, especially better than family. I see now how wrong that was." The honesty in her voice surprised me. "Alex, we all have different paths. Your achievements at Goldman Sachs are real and valuable. What matters is that we support each other, not compete." "But I didn't support you," she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I judged you. I assumed your choices reflected some kind of failure rather than a deliberate strategy I was too narrow-minded to understand." Grandmother, who had been listening quietly while serving pie, finally spoke up with the wisdom that comes from 8 decades of living. "Children, I've watched this family for many years. Tonight reminded me that love isn't about what someone achieves. It's about seeing who they truly are, even when they can't show you everything." She turned to me with eyes that sparkled with pride. "Serena dear, I may not understand billions of dollars or Wall Street, but I understand character. The fact that you chose humility over glory, that you valued our love more than our admiration, tells me everything I need to know about the woman you've become." As the evening continued, stories began to emerge. I found myself sharing not just the financial aspects of my work, but the philosophy behind it. How Sterling Capital focused not just on profit, but on sustainable growth and ethical investment practices. How my time at Target had indeed provided invaluable insights into consumer behavior and economic trends that no boardroom could offer. "You see," I explained as we moved back to the living room, settling once again around the dying fireplace, "real understanding of markets comes from understanding people. Every transaction at Target, every conversation with a customer struggling to afford groceries, every observation about spending patterns during different seasons, all of that feeds into investment decisions worth billions." Father leaned forward, genuinely engaged now. "So when you were scanning barcodes, you were actually conducting research?" "Among other things, yes, but more importantly, I was staying grounded. Success in finance can be intoxicating. It's easy to lose sight of how economic policies and market movements affect real people's lives. Working at Target kept me connected to that reality." The conversation continued well past midnight. We talked about everything, from global economics to family memories, from investment philosophy to holiday traditions we wanted to continue. Alexandra gradually rejoined the discussion, offering insights from her own experience that complemented rather than competed with mine. As the evening finally wound down and family members began to head to their respective guest rooms, Alexandra lingered behind. "Serena," she said when we were alone, "I want you to know that this evening has changed me, not just because of who you turned out to be, but because of who you chose to remain despite everything you could have been." I studied her face, seeing genuine transformation rather than mere shock. "What do you mean?" "You could have revealed your identity at any point during these 3 years. You could have put me in my place, embarrassed me in front of the family, made me feel small. But you chose grace instead. Even tonight, when you finally told the truth, you did it with kindness rather than triumph." She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. "I realize now that real confidence doesn't need to diminish others to feel strong. Real success doesn't require putting others down to lift yourself up. You've been teaching that lesson all evening, probably all these years, and I was too proud to learn it." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "Alex, we're family. We're supposed to lift each other up, not tear each other down. Your drive and ambition are admirable. They just need to be channeled toward building rather than competing. I'd like to learn from you, she said earnestly. Not about finance or business, but about character. About how to be successful without losing sight of what really matters. As I prepared for bed that night, I reflected on the evening's events. The grand revelation had been satisfying certainly, but what felt most meaningful was the genuine reconnection that followed. For 3 years I had wondered whether my family could love me without the trappings of wealth and success. Tonight proved they could, and more importantly, that they could love me even more deeply once they understood the full picture of who I had chosen to become. The next morning brought a fresh snowfall and a house filled with a different energy entirely. Over breakfast, the conversation flowed naturally between family news and gentle questions about my work. There was no awkwardness, no walking on eggshells, just the comfortable dynamic of a family that had rediscovered its foundation. Theodore's updated report arrived precisely at 6 a.m. as requested. I reviewed it quickly on my phone while sipping coffee that Mother had made just the way I liked it. A small gesture that meant more than any billion-dollar deal. Good news? Father asked, noticing my satisfied expression as I finished reading. Very good, I confirmed. Sometimes the most important decisions aren't about the money involved, but about the principles behind them. This particular investment will help fund renewable energy projects across 3 continents while generating solid returns for our investors. You're using money to make money while making the world better, Mother asked, her face lighting up with understanding. That's the goal, I replied. Profit and purpose don't have to be mutually exclusive. As the family began to disperse for their various post-holiday plans, Alexandra approached me one final time. Serena, I've been thinking about something all night, she said. Would you consider letting me shadow you sometime? Not for career advancement or networking, but because I want to understand how you think about business and life. I feel like I've been approaching everything from the wrong angle. I considered her request thoughtfully. Actually, Alex, I have a better idea. Sterling Capital is always looking for ethical, driven professionals who understand that success means more than just personal advancement. If you're serious about changing your approach, we might be able to find a place for you on our team. Her eyes widened with surprise and something that looked like hope. You would consider hiring me after everything? Family is family, I said simply. Besides, you've proven tonight that you're capable of growth and self-reflection. Those are rare qualities in our industry. As Alexandra left that morning, she carried herself differently, less armor, more authenticity. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Later, as I prepared to return to my own apartment in the city, Father pulled me aside for a private conversation. Serena, he began, his voice thick with emotion, I need to tell you something. Your mother and I have spent years worrying that we had failed you somehow, that our values hadn't prepared you for the real world. Last night, we discovered the opposite was true. You succeeded not despite our values, but because of them. What do you mean? Humility, integrity, treating everyone with dignity regardless of their station in life. These were things we tried to teach you, but we lost sight of them ourselves when we started judging you by society's standards instead of character's standards. You never lost sight of what really mattered. I felt tears welling up, the emotional weight of 3 years of hidden identity finally beginning to lift. I learned everything important from you and Mother. The financial success is just a tool. What matters is how you use it and who you remain while wielding it. We're proud of you, he said, embracing me tightly. Not because you're wealthy or powerful, but because you're good. Everything else is just details. As I drove back to the city that evening, my second-hand Honda Civic no longer felt like a disguise, but like a choice. One of many that reflected my values rather than my means. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions worth billions of dollars, new opportunities to use wealth as a force for positive change. But tonight had reminded me that success without connection is hollow, achievement without love is meaningless, and power without humility is dangerous. The sterling capital empire I had built would continue to grow and thrive, but the sterling family bonds I had tested and ultimately strengthened would prove far more valuable than any financial portfolio. Sometimes the most important investments we make aren't in markets or companies, but in relationships and the courage to be truly known by those who matter most. As the city lights came into view, I smiled at the thought of Monday morning's board meeting, where I would continue to be myself, all of myself, finally, without apology or pretense. Christmas had given me the greatest gift of all, the freedom to live authentically in every aspect of my life, and that, I reflected, was worth more than all the billions in the world. That's our story for today. We hope you enjoyed this incredible tale. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Subscribe for more captivating stories like this, and don't forget to like and share this video. Thank you for being here with us. See you next time.